The Atlantic winds stand along the misty Massachusetts coast wearing whispers of forgotten sin. Enlarged stone marker, it makes me laugh a little. Local fishermen's cross. They themselves refuse to speak when they pass by, and even the boldest historians. What he points out is open. The marker only has 1687 and 2 dates. A name that once struck fear in the hearts of each God-fearing colonialist. Ezekiel and Judith Harrington. For almost 20 years, these brothers and sisters have been building up blood empire and accusations, enhancing the richness of cries. They are innocent and capture their properties. But when their troublesome union gave birth to a child, it was very grotesque. Even the most fortified doctors escaped in fear. People whispered the justice of that divine. Finally, find them. What actually happened in this isolated house manna? The bright body and mind captured by his parents remained buried beneath the layers of fear. Superstitions are always. Before continuing with the brothers and sisters, Harrington and their awful heritage, please fill in our channel and enter this notification. This kind of story, a story that most people would want to forget, is exactly what is revealed here. Let me do that again. These dark stories are dispersed for everyone, so I know in which comments you're hearing from the states and cities. America's Horn. The truth about Harrington Fortune and his fucking heir reveals calculated levels. Evil that even makes the most reinforced observer a problem of this humanity. When desire rejects consciousness, there is truly a capacity. Massachusetts colony. It existed in eternal religious enthusiasm and a state of religious economy since the 1660s. Struggle. Small coastal communities such as Waring-Wickham, colonies are barely. Between rocky cliffs and pine forests, 300 souls survived fishing. Agriculture and difficult relationships with supernatural beliefs that control each aspect of colonial life. A Puritan doctrine required a certain degree of vigilance in the influence of Satan and such isolated suspected communities. It can spread faster than a forest fire. Ezekiel Harrington, 28 years old. He possessed clear features and pierced his gray eyes. Judgment her sister, Judith, 25, and her strict and incredible beauty shares the same corner jaw and the same cold behavior. But where is Ezekiel? They attracted attention by their existence. Judith was influenced by the whispering words and carefully planted. Question. The brothers and sisters received an unusual education for their station. Their father. Boston's failed merchants insisted on reading, writing and, above all, teaching them. Understand the legitimate subtleties of property rights and inheritance. When your parents die of fever. In 1663, leaving their brothers and sisters with more than a few modest farm debts and installations, they faced the same. A dark perspective like countless other young settlers. But unlike his neighbors who looked to honest work and trade, Harrington's brothers and sisters recognized the opportunity for an increased hysteria surrounding witchcraft. Community. New England, witches, people who demanded special knowledge of definitions began to hire. Satan's servant. These professionals can order large costs for their services, making them more profitable. Parties to the forfeited property of the accused person are often acquired. The brothers and sisters' first client was in the village. Milford, 2 days of deep journey, crop breakdowns and stillbirth. He created a mature atmosphere for supernatural explanations. Ezekiel introduced the ones he had trained. Those who studied the signs of magic have experienced the arts, pretending that Judith is his assistant. Detecting the accused hidden mark. Their methods were cruelly simple. They are: enter the community in question, study the local dynamics of wealth and power, and systematically condemn them. The property is proven to be the most profitable and is confiscated. Widow Constance Fletcher became their first. The victim, the wife, whose late husband left him with a precious grain factory, wanted some local men. Below. Harrington's brothers and sisters are wise. Average communication with dark forces. The evidence they presented seemed too overwhelming. There were mystical traces on his body, and they secretly gave it to him. Forced exam. Evidence from a neighbor who claimed to be seen seeing strange words tweeting her. It made Judith and his factory formed terrible. When others failed, he continued to produce flour. In fact, it's the result of his excellent service and his amazing location. Constance Fletcher was hanged on November 15, 1664, and his factory was divided between the city and Harrington brothers and sisters pay for their services. But that was the case. The beginning of a business that ultimately covers 8 different communities and claims the lives of 57 innocent people over 15 years. Solutions 4. Ezekiel and Judith were married, but did not come from a romantic tendency. Such a thing. Unions between brothers and sisters were technically possible according to colonial law when they were justified by persuasive circumstances. But from actual calculations of the cold. In 1675, the brothers and sisters managed their assets. It costs over £15,000 and is in great condition according to colonial standards. They had goods in 9 different communities, held and owned mortgages on dozens of farms and businesses. Detailed files of their various criminal acts covering over 10 years. The problems they encountered were inheritance and security. If any of the brothers marries a family, their husbands receive legal rights. A portion of their wealth and more dangerous potential access to carefully protected secrets has been created. Their condition is possible. Similarly, if you die without a direct heir, if not alone, there may be complicated inheritance laws. This leads to the fact that their assets are distributed among distant parents, or even declared a colonial government. This decision is demonstrated by the same ruthless pragmatism and characterizes their entire career. Ezekiel as an elder. The brother and sister married Judith and married a private ceremony held by the corrupt minister. Court in the village of Salem. Unions are kept secret from the larger community. Instead, it was presented as a commercial partnership between the confirmed bachelors and the baccalaureate who dedicated them. Life to serve God by identifying and eliminating supernatural threats. Secret marriage. It was held on December 21, 1675 during the winter solstice. It is chosen for its symbolic meaning, not for its supernatural beliefs. The ceremony was held underground in their area, only proven by a corrupt minister and 2 servants. Silence was threatened. The marriage itself was a chuckle of Christian tradition and was not executed in. It is a celebration of love and spiritual union, but as a legal manipulation. Protects accumulated wealth and general secrets. Pregnancy has begun. It appears that at the beginning of 1676 he was confirmed to be confident in the bad agreement between his brothers and sisters. Judith province generally progressed in the first few months without any signs of complications or abnormalities. The brothers and sisters hired a qualified obstetrician. We provide etiquette and the best care. They ordered a special product. Imported drugs, and even the appropriate cradles. Silk bedding, adapted to children, is intended to carry over great wealth. However, when Judith's pregnancy moved to her, the final trimester began to show up with subtle signs that something was wrong. The first sign came inside. 7 months after Judith began experiencing what midwife called his violence unusual. And adjustments. Sarah Whittima, an experienced midwife who gave birth. Over 300 children throughout their careers have never felt the fetal movements as if they had happened inside. Wobble Judith. And this is not a typical model of strikes and turns that characterizes normal development. The move appears to include several entities involved in what could only be called hostilities. It's like that. They are fighting. Sarah recognized her assistant, a young woman named Emma Prescott. Boston will be a secret but routine delivery to help what was expected. I've delivered twins a few times and have never felt that aggressive movement. It's as if they were trying to hurt themselves. Ezekiel is licensed. These fears are fears as the superstitious imagination of an old lady, but in private he began to worry. The brothers and sisters have invested too much in this pregnancy and admitted that something could go wrong, and Ezekiel hastily went on her own research aimed at explaining and resolving complications. I have obtained all the medical texts available in the colonies that correspond to doctors in London and Edinburgh. Consult with several midwives from other regions to gather information about difficult births. What he discovered in his research was encouraging and deeply surprising. Many texts have been confirmed. This twin pregnancy often included more brutal fetal movements than a single birth, especially in children. They competed for space within the uterus and limited resources. But the source also mentions an increased risk associated with what is called relatives, especially among parents. Higher indicators are birth, physical disability, and mental disability with surviving offspring. When is it born? It finally began on March 15, 1677, lasted for almost 2 days, and participated. Complications that pursued Sarah Vito-Kim for the rest of her life. Gemini appeared immediately. He is perceived as strictly intelligent in members who branch out to impossible angles. Skulls that you think you have. Additional bones have been developed. Tores, and perhaps internal organs. It is true that these children were shocked to teach women. There was awareness and adjustment, which seemed much higher than their obvious development stage. They moved along with the target and captured nearby objects. They appeared to communicate with each other through a series of sounds and gestures. Interpretation. Despite their serious physical disabilities, the twins demonstrate. The intelligence was amazing and deeply surprising at the same time. Some children. Ezekiel and Judith appointed Gabriel and Raphael and chose a biblical name that could provide some protection. The supernatural interpretation of their nation survived their difficult births and began to grow in such a way. The expectations of each child born with such a heavy transformation were heard. I have it. Their first anniversary became clear that their intelligence, despite their belongings, was well beyond the normal milestones. Physical limitations have become more pronounced. Since 1677. 1685 focused on both the height of the Harrington Power brothers and sisters and the beginning of the biggest test. While Gabriel and Raphael are turning children into children, they're only one. The combination of strong physical transformation and extraordinary intelligence it's far from simple medical care. Boys, because they were really men. Gemini required constant observation despite the unusual general anatomy. And professional attention has made it difficult to support siblings, which are becoming increasingly complicated. At that time, the twins reached their 8th birthday in March 1685, becoming unprecedented during the colonial era. Massachusetts. Children of serious people with disabilities had intellectual capabilities that contributed to the opportunity. An educated adult. Despite being unable to walk normally or taking part in typical child activities, Gabriel and Raphael learned to read for 4 years and mastered basic mathematics. For the 5th year, and 7th course, I took part in a philosophical discussion that would have challenged the university students, but perhaps the most surprising of all was the growth of their conscience. Parents have true nature and activity. Gemini have been quarantined on the ground for the rest of their lives. To protect them from cruel stares and supernatural fears, but in reality, prevent someone from testifying to your condition and combining it with God's judgment regarding the crimes of your parents. However, this isolation gave them unprecedented access to private conversations with their parents, commercial files, planning sessions for various crime companies. Gabriel and Raphael developed supernatural abilities. When adults enter the area, silence and motionless storage, leader. Are Ezekiel and Judith too young? There are too many obstacles to understand what they have heard. This hypothesis has proven to be catastrophic. Finally, it leads to the destruction of brothers and sisters. Gemini in 1685. He had detailed knowledge of his parents' witch hunt. Proof of production, glorious witnesses, systematic murder for the financial benefits of the guilty people. More. It should be noted that they have begun to realize that their physical condition is not a result of God. It is an accidental decision or unhappiness, but rather the direct result of the decision of parents to marry. A genealogy to protect their criminal empire. This understanding has fulfilled children with a mixture of anger. The tour and determination were evident in its strength and refinement. Despite their complete dependence on their parents regarding their physical limitations and basic support, Gabriel and Raphael began to reveal the truth about Harrington's criminal enterprise and planned steps to ensure justice for their parents. The first opportunity for the twins to seize his knowledge in the summer of 1685. When a young woman named Margaret Caldwell arrives on the field seeking work as a servant. Margaret was a blacksmith named Thomas Caldwell, the daughter of one of the previous victims of Ezekiel and Judith. He was executed for magic in 1679 after organizing accusations that his brothers and sisters had acquired valuable forges. First-class real estate at the heart of Hadley's transition. Margaret didn't know Harrington's brothers and sisters' responsibility for his father's death. She knew they were rich and respected members of the community. He can assure that the work of the young woman left the poor man from the tragedy of the family. What she discovered at her residence. But there was evidence in a row. It ultimately leads to the most important scandal in the witches' trial. American colonial history. The twins' strategies to communicate with Margaret were both brilliant and heartbreaking. Despite their serious obstacles to speech and speech restrictions, they developed the written means. Message where she finds them during the cleaning task. These messages simply started from the base. Information about hidden documents and suspicious financial files is being developed to include gradually instructions on where to find evidence of parents. More importantly, Gabriel and Raphael learned to distinguish different visitors from parents and developed ways to prevent Margaret. Particularly dangerous people should have arrived on the field. They were well visible to their parents. Operations that understand that some of their partners were more cruel and unpredictable with Ezekiel, Judith herself, and they used their advanced knowledge of meetings to help Margaret avoid potentially fatal meetings. Turning point arrived in September 1685. Fee. Hidden entrance from the department behind the false wall in Ezekiel's study. He contained detailed financial books documenting the criminal activity of a 15-year-old. These accounting books were not included. Not only the payments received in each witch test, but also a detailed list of properties confiscated. Value and designation estimated by preparation costs and certificate costs. It revealed the systematic nature of their operations. Margaret was opened in these files, and he was allowed uncontested evidence that Harrington's brothers and sisters killed innocent people for money, but also placed them a dangerous person. She'd noticed if Hekel and Judith found it. Knowledge, they eliminate it without hesitation and use the same method they have improved against others. Victims. His only hope was to find a way to display his crime, to protect himself, to protect his twins. Punishment. The solution she ultimately chose was courage and strategic thinking that will impress experienced criminal investigators. Don't try running with evidence or facing siblings directly. Margaret secretly began copying the worst. Documented while establishing contact with Father Bonneuil's Tone, the Jesuit priests. I recently arrived in Boston de France and had theological knowledge to understand the supernatural results and political relations for investigating powerful colonial personalities. Father Benoit. Thorne's investigation into Harrington's brothers and sisters began skeptical, but soon. The fear when he found a layer after a systematic layer of evil, it acted upon. It has been largely uncontrolled for over 20 years. Priest Margaret Caldwell's first approach was wise. And indirectly, a direct accusation against such a powerful and respected character is likely. It leads to its own destruction using the same methods they used against other victims. But the evidence. This Margaret gradually shares a torn father, a copy of his financial accounting books and a list of witnesses. Awful about payments and threats and all detailed marking cards. The confiscated property and its current location of ownership depict the table of the crime business. Even the worst expectations of priests about the abilities of evil humans have exceeded. Experiences with both Father Thorne. Theology and natural philosophy did something very unique to understand the full consequences of the fact that Margaret was. I discovered it. Unlike colonial authorities that can reject supernatural accusations outside the border. The jurisdiction or healthcare professional, priest, could only focus on the child's physical condition. Knowledge and power to investigate Harrington's criminal and moral aspects. The decision to visit the succession in October 1685 was represented by the brothers and sisters. A call to an ordinary shepherd. The new priest is about to present himself to prominent members of the colony. The community is provided by the spiritual leadership of families who have undergone difficult birth tragedy. Ezekiel and Judith praised the visit as an opportunity, confident in his ability to manipulate religious authorities. Collect detailed legalization of community status, and information about potential threats. Operation. What they couldn't expect was Father Thorne's specific training to recognize the deceit. His experience identifying the psychological and spiritual consequences of systematic evil. In a few minutes. Upon entering the field, the priest discovered an atmospheric violation that suggested a deep spiritual existence. Psychological balance for decades, not corruption, supernatural intervention. It is called murder and moral degradation. It is said that the priest's demands to meet children are motivated. Pastoral care for young souls involved in physical problems. But that's true. The aim was to assess whether Gabriel and Raphael had the information and awareness necessary for the service. Witness to parents. Margaret's written message suggested that Gemini understands more. Their situation understood their parents. However, Father Thorne had to thank him for his first ability. By attracting them to his investigation before putting their security at risk. When Father Thorne finally has access. The camera of the child he met there surpasses Margaret's detailed description in his combination. Tragedy and opportunity. Gabriel and Raphael despite their hard bodies. It is demonstrated by obvious limitations, daily pain, and intellectual refinement. And emotional maturity was great for kids of all ages, especially isolated children. Normal social interactions for life. This is even more important. Gemini showed no fear of the priest, despite the fact that they had never seen him before, and rather showed that they could only do that. It is explained as relief and hope. They were clearly waiting for everyone to have the strength and courage to challenge themselves. Their parents, and they soon began to try and report information about the crime they had. The evidence they observed were either hidden or destroyed. Theological preparation for Thorne theology. It includes training in the field of service to victims of extreme cruelty. And these children were recognized by suffering, conscience, and the same combination. The hopeless hope he saw for survivors and torture and persecution. However, unlike previous cases where the victim was an adult, we can explain and see the situation. Justice, Gabriel and Raphael are locked up in their physical limitations. And their total dependence on these same people who were responsible for both their states and states. Suffering. The departure of the priests of the domain was superficially heartfelt, but all parties realized it. A fundamental conflict has begun. Father Thorn saw enough to confirm his worst suspicions. The situation of the child and the nature of the parents, Ezekiel and Judith, be recognized in a unique way and question the level of perception and determination. It was an unprecedented danger for their carefully built lives. Investigating Father Thorn. When it was systematic and complete to return to Boston, he was launched. There are complete resources from the Catholic Church's administrative and information networks. Unlike the legal system of individual colonies, the Church had a complex method. Evidence collection, testimony analysis, and litigation construction. People who believe in earthly justice. Within 3 weeks, Father Thorn has collected the complete files on the activities of the Harrington brothers and sisters, including financial reports. Sabunan Colonial Bank, evidence of the victim's surviving parents, and more than anything else. Marcus Fletcher's detailed recognition, plants and former accomplices who helped train some trial witnesses in exchange for our payments and protection. Legal issues. Marcus Fletcher's perception revealed the actual Harrington area. Details on how to choose a victim, creating false evidence, and coordination with a corrupt manager guarantees favorable legal outcomes. But what's even more important to Father Thorn? Goal. Fletcher's testimony included specific information about the siblings. The decision to marry each other and their apparent discussion of their use. Children's conditions will further expand their wealth through rich, curious, wushious personal exhibitions. Medical abnormality. This revelation added an additional layer of fear to the already overwhelming company. Ezekiel and Judith not only condemned the death of innocent for financial advantage. They also brought their children into the world thanks to a constant union designed specifically to protect them. Crime empire. And now they plan to use their descendants and suffer from additional benefits. But Harrington, the most powerful weapon in the campaign against Father Thorn's brothers and sisters, turns out to be a child. We ourselves. Gabriel and Raphael, despite young people and physical limitations. There were detailed memories of conversations and events that guaranteed a conclusive confirmation of the evidence found in the parents' files. That's even more important. Their obvious spirit and moral conscience made them persuasive. A witness whose testimony could not be rejected as a fancy of a wounded heart. In a detailed interview with the priest, Gemini of a secret visit hosted by Margaret Caldwell revealed the level of systemic violence. Operations that go far beyond simple negligence. It's not just Ezekiel and Judith. I hid my kids from the world to protect my reputation, but I also used twin quarantine. Reliance on the implementation of psychological experiences aimed at examining the limitations of human endurance and adaptability. Gabriel and Raphael described the year in which they are subject to painful medical procedures without anesthesia. Forced to perform intellectual tasks under the threat of food and comfort and be used as items. Their parents are the theory of the relationship between physical transformation and mental abilities. The most frightening. Everything shows that parents systematically document development and behavior. Intent to sell detailed reports to European doctors interested in the effects of kinship on people. Desk. The last few months of 1685. Harrington's succession converges multiple forces to threaten brothers and sisters in a carefully built blood empire. And a deceitful response. Father Thorn's investigation reached where he had evidence that he could not refute. Their crime, however, he faced sensitive problems to expose such influential and dangerous people. Without initiating violent reactions that could compromise a child or other potential witness. Meanwhile, Gabriel and Raphael are becoming increasingly bolder in their efforts to help their parents fall apart. Use their privileged position as isolated disabled people. Even Margaret Caldwell observes and documents their actions. I was unable to testify completely safely. The twins developed a complicated way of registering their information. Create a hidden cache of written evidence that explains physical restrictions, their offenders' parents' progress ongoing. Future activities and plans. The increased disobedience of children was not carried out without the parents noticing that they had. He began to suspect that their descendants were more conscious and capable than before. Ezekiel and Judith's response to this suspicion revealed that there was no complete natural parental attachment. It characterized the relationship with birth twins. Instead of being proud of your child, their intelligence or care of the brothers and sisters examined Gabriel and Raphael. Autonomy as a potential threat to their security. The crisis that ultimately brings about an entire criminal company mowing began in early December 1685. When Ezekiel discovers evidence that someone has turned to a hidden financial report. Fake wall mesh signs, hidden loops, dust patterns moved to the proposed document. Unauthorized records repeated in most sensitive files. Even more surprising, the results were that the people who visited had sufficient knowledge to determine the biggest one. Centrimiminal material. Direct links to corruption, pages containing witnesses and product threats. The scam was subtly marked by small pencil points, which is not visible as an accidental inspection, but clearly indicated. Systematic research. Ezekiel's direct doubt fell to Margaret Caldwell. In the end, the housing employee status gave him both the opportunity and the motivation to spy on his employer. But agreement. Fighter careers, they discovered that even if she really knew their crimes, she couldn't. They were held responsible for any security violations they discovered. It's true that their children were like that. Systematically gathering evidence against them for several months is outside their psychological framework. No one of his siblings thinks of opportunities at first. They're very used to seeing. Gabriel and Raphael were helpless dependents, and their physical limitations made them almost harmless. They could not imagine the twins as an aggressive threat to their safety. This blindness to a child's ability has proven to be a fatal calculation error. It costs them all that they worked to build. Ezekiel and Judith focused on suspicion of external threats. Like Margaret Caldwell and Father Thorne, Gabriel and Raphael continued to work to gather information. It's getting more refined and courage. Gemini has developed a communication method that allows them. Despite the fact that they are physically divided at most everyday events, they coordinate their efforts. They used combined combinations of written messages, coded sounds, and even handling with household items will exchange information and plan their next steps. They're physical limitations that parents consider to be guaranteed. In fact, they were forced to develop intellectual and observational skills. People of ordinary children of age. Gabriel and Raphael in mid-December 1685. A collection of evidence included in the details as well as documents about the parents' past crimes. Intelligence regarding planned future operations. They found out that Ezekiel and Judith were preparing. Recent Indian raids expand activities in Connecticut River Valley, where community was created. Tensions that can be used to exploit the accusations of supernatural cooperation with hostile. The military quickly threatened the twin openings more than their parents. He began planning their exclusion as a potential witness and security risk. Gabriel and Raphael have heard debate about a tragic accident that could lead to children with disabilities. During the harsh winter months, they saw their parents prepare. I'll arrange it until spring. Children's reaction to this. The threat demonstrated both their incredible intelligence and their deep understanding of their parents' psychology. Instead of trying to run or simply warning his father of their immediate danger, Gabriel and Raphael decided to accelerate his actions to gather evidence. Place the foundation for the final conflict. Their plans. He was refined, elegant and awful. They used them. Organize scripts that force Ezekiel and Judith to reveal them. The true nature in the presence of witnesses who have the authority to ensure justice. Twins. I realized that their physical state is unlikely to survive in any type of direct conflict with their parents, but they If their death could guarantee the revelation of the crimes they allegedly claimed, they were ready to sacrifice themselves. Dozens of innocent lives. The possibility they were waiting appeared on December 21, 1685. The 10th anniversary of the secret wedding and date of parents, including Ezekiel and Judith, has always been celebrated by private. A celebration that reveals their true personality more clearly than any other case. This annual ritual was offered, when brothers and sisters considered it a celebration of evil's successful partnerships. Gabriel and Raphael have an ideal vibe for the final gambit. When we thought we'd seen it all. Harrington's fears are intensifying. If this story gives you chills, share this video with friends. A person who loves dark puzzles. Don't forget to click the button as a button to support the content and not subscribe. Such a story. Let me open, it will happen. Twins. This plan requires a certain amount of time, complete commitment, and a level of courage, which is great for adults. Needless to say, children who didn't know their lives behind the prison walls at home. But Gabriel and Raphael. They realized they had things their parents didn't expect. The moral clarity that comes from suffering. Injustice and intellectual ability that transforms this clarity. Action. The event on December 21, 1685 was held with accuracy. It reflected the meticulous planning month of two 8-year-olds who had no idea about their normal childhood. Instead, he was forced to develop the strategic thinking of an experienced investigator. Gabriel and Raphael. The plan relied on their intimate knowledge of their parents' habits, personality, and criminal methods. Combined with their unique position as constantly underrepresented witnesses of Ezekiel and Judith. Twins. Father Thorne arrived in the evening and his parents agreed to arrive traditionally. Private rituals including birthday celebrations, consideration of their accumulated wealth, and reading. Select an excerpt from the list of victims and plan for future operations. Brothers and sisters are celebrating. It is considered the best secret, occurring in a room directly above the child's camera. Gabriel and Raphael have been listening to these annual measurements for many years. The atmosphere is similar. On December evenings, when Ezekiel and Judith were preparing for them, they were fatty with almost concrete evil sensations. Celebrating the 10th anniversary. The brothers and sisters spend the day looking at their financial files and their preparations. Material for the fact that they were planning to become their last winter in Massachusetts before they moved their activities into the most profitable and understudied territory of Caroline's colony. They had already begun to eliminate some of their New England objects and were preparing to establish a new character. This allows them to continue their crime business in areas where their reputation is not yet ahead of them. Of theirs. Gabriel and Raphael are limited by their cameras. Parents/private meetings, organized for several weeks and prepare this evening with methodological accuracy of experience. Conspirator. Despite the physical limitations, they managed to create some hidden cache evidence. A detailed card of confiscation, including copies of the most compromised documents of parents through inheritance. A written property and certificate explaining the particular crime they witnessed or heard of planned. More importantly, twins spend several months weakening certain structural elements of the construction of inheritance. By studying architectural textbooks, we use tools created from the household items and techniques they have studied. Of parents who own a large library. Their plan required not only ideal time but understanding as well. Physics and engineering were challenging as an adult manufacturer. Still, they got these concepts. Their need to avoid prisons and their desperate resolve. Father Thorne arrived on the field. In the meantime, he explained the meticulous intelligence he spent several weeks. Construction rally, determined potential evacuation routes and communication protocols with Gabriel, and determined communication protocols. Raphael passes through the optical signal system visible through the room window. Military priest. Fawn. He served Capellan during European conflicts before joining the church, and offered him tactical knowledge proven to be invaluable when planning essentially disguised rescue operations. As an idyllic visit. The authorities who accompanied the broken father were not included. Not only colonial officials who have been ordered to arrest, but also doctors ready to study and treat Harrington. Children, legal professionals are ready to catalog evidence, and even qualified engineers are ready. That experience will be needed to safely extract victims from those promised to be dangerous. Showdown. This level of training reflected the understanding of the priests they had. An opportunity for brothers and sisters to reveal Harrington's crimes before they do or eliminate all witnesses. Activities. Ezekiel and Judith. When Father Thorne attacked the entrance gate at 7 a.m. that night. He was in the middle of a birthday ritual, surrounded by evidence that made it impossible to deny. If they were the subject of integrity. The first reaction of the brothers and sisters to an unexpected visit was annoyed confidence. They were able to reject official requests over 20 years ago and saw. There is no reason why this case is different. However, as Father Thorne explained that he was saying that, the purpose was take care of Margaret Caldwell's well and the desire to provide spiritual leadership to families amidst the challenges. Winter season. Ezekiel and Judith began to feel something was. He is fundamentally different from this visitor. The priest's way was too sure of him. The question is too specific, his knowledge of the state of their home is too detailed for every day. Entertainment call. The truth age came when Father Thorne asked for permission to visit Gabriel and Raphael. I pray for their constant health and comfort. The direct instinct of the brothers and sisters had to abandon this. Ask with the usual explanation of a child's vulnerability and sensitivity to excitement, but they realized that such a rejection might seem suspicious to anyone. It clearly attracted more attention than previous visitors. Their decision to provide Thorne access to their fathers. Children's cameras have proven to be a fatal error, destroying everything they've built into 2 decades of systematic murder and theft. When the priest enters the twin room, Ezekiel and Judith follow. A system he and his children had previously organized. That's how Gabriel and Raphael reacted. Destructive immediately. Despite the presence of their parents, the twins began to read detailed explanations. For specific crimes they witnessed, a description of the victim's name and location of evidence on date. Their voices were distorted by their physical condition, but they carried out authority and the accuracy that gave their testimony an unreasonable confidence. Night. On September 14, 1679, Gabriel carefully began his words. Despite the necessary efforts, it is known. Our father and mother met Marcus Fletcher underground to plan Thomas Caldwell's accusation. Mother offered Fletcher silver coins from Rebecca Whitmore confiscated jewels, and her father gave her detailed instructions on where to hide dolls that are found searching for Sarai Caldwell. Raphael. Continuing reading without breaks, demonstrating the adjusted preparation that made them. The evidence is very destructive. The doll contained hair pulled from the Coldella. The youngest girl undergoing a forced health check. Supernatural traces. Fletcher was invited to place the poet under the anvil of Cordule. You will find it by a witness who is informed exactly where to look. The psychological impact of their hearing. The most carefully protected secrets that their children read in front of the obviously owned priest. Management acting on these signs was disruptive due to Ezekiel and Judith's self-assessment. The first among them. The criminal history was not entirely prepared for the threat they hadn't expected. Due to betrayal. The victims they had hoped were helpless and ignorant. But the twins were far from the end with their revelation. Gabriel and Raphael spend years and remember not only their parents but also today. Future activities and plans. They described the stolen city about the stolen city. This property protects parents from investigations and details the most harmful chain network of all. It revealed the presence of additional victims. There was no suspicion of murder. On the chest under the floor. The voice gets stronger when he realizes that salvation is finally in his hand. There are 37 gems from. A woman was executed, including Mary Hutchins' wedding ring, who was hanged for witchcraft in 1681. After his father condemned him for the curse of his cow. Gabriel picked up the story well. Mary Hutchins was. All prices are endless. My father killed a cow using poison he bought from a Boston merchant. Then he declared. Animal death was evidence of supernatural intervention. Mary's property. 12 acres of main agricultural vehicles and her late husband were split. As a payment for the decision of the witch between the city's treasures and parents. Detailed accuracy. Children's certificate combined with obvious intelligence and their terrible physical evidence. This state produced a large part of the fact that a reasonable observer cannot reject it. Or explain it. Father Thorne not only brought legitimate authority to investigate Harrington. Not only crime, but also witnesses who cannot question confidence, and save each word from the twin revelation. Ezekiel and Judith's reaction to this devastating effect. It revealed the complete absence of natural human emotions that characterized their entire crime business. Faster. How to show shock, repentance and even fear at the happiness of children. The brothers and sisters quickly calculated how to eliminate witnesses and began to avoid the consequences of their crimes. Their first attempt to control the damage was to distrust Gabriel and Raphael's testimony. The children suffered from the errors caused by physical condition. However, this strategy collapsed during Father Thorne's time. A copy of the document was made to confirm each detail given by Gemini and the testimony of others. An eyewitness who independently reviewed certain elements of an account. I realized that this was the denial. That's not possible and that their criminal business should be fully disclosed by Ezekiel and Judith. An emergency plan they developed for this script. Hide weapons across Mana and escape. Itinerary and means in case of unexpected circumstances that will allow all witnesses to be eliminated. And they run on territory where the colonial powers could not reach them. The violence afterwards was quick and fast. Although cruel, he has changed in the same way that Gabriel and Raphael expected, and it is foreseen. Gemini studied parents' emergency procedures and developed a counter. Measures aimed at protecting rescuers. Ezekiel and Judith couldn't avoid justice. When Ezekiel painted a hidden pistol in an attempt to shoot his father's thorn, he discovers that the mechanism of firing the weapon has been finely hampered. A small metal fragment that Gabriel carefully inserted into the barrel for several weeks. The pistol exploded inside it. His hands caused serious wounds, and he couldn't continue fighting. Judith's attempt to use a hidden knife. It broke against the colonial officials when she called out one of the many traps on the ground that Raphael had. It was prepared by weakening certain floors in strategic locations. That fall is not only deactivated, but also deactivated. It also activated many of the mechanical devices twins have built on barricade doors and windows. Prevention to do it anyway. The final conflict occurred in Main Hall of Inheritance with structural modifications made by Gabriel and Raphael in a few months. We finally reached the proposed goal. Gemini calculated the exact amount of damage needed to identify. Certain parts of the building are unstable, leaving safe passageways due to suspected rescuers. Ezekiel and Judith. I realized their escape route was blocked and their weapons were useless. They were in a final desperation. An attempt to close the children forever. But Gabriel and Raphael were hoping for this answer. Final protection has been prepared. The coordinated collapse of the central structure of succession support, it is. Help your parents and create a protective shelter around you and your rescuers. Gemini Engineering. The calculations were surprisingly accurate. The construction cooperation just happened as they planned. Ezekiel and Judith are attached under the giant wooden beams and create a garbage field, leaving Gabriel. Raphael, Father Thorn and officials from the colony of Al-Qub are protected. It remained structurally struck. Physical destruction of domains serves many simple purposes. Stop trying to escape from your brothers and sisters. It collapses hidden parts and hidden storage zones. Additional evidence of their crimes, including preserved documents, stolen property, and even bodies. A victim whose death has never been officially recorded. More importantly, the destruction of the buildings that you owned. The prison and torture cameras for Gabriel and Raphael represent their iconic end. The beginning of the prisoners and their release. Gemini literally killed a restricted wall. 8 years ago, using their intelligence and determination to transform physical limitations with strategic advantages. When rescuers cleaned enough waste to finally reach the survivor, they found a scene showing Harrington's moral side. Ezekiel and Judith posed. They die under the wreckage, and their faces show the shock and distrust of criminals who didn't think it was. Their children were able to sort out their falls. Gabriel and Raphael were injured and exhausted, but were very. He is very alive and is trying to continue to provide testimony that exposes all his parents. Crime business. The survival of the twins and their obvious intelligence made them convince the witness whose testimony is definitive in subsequent trials. But more than that. It is important to note that their courage to expose their parents' crimes showed it despite the great personal risks. Physical restrictions should not limit moral institutions or desire for justice. The consequence of Harrington's collapse sent shockwaves into colonial states of Massachusetts. With legal procedures, religious practices, and community vigilance. Future generations. Detailed evidence found in the ruins in combination with Gabriel and Raphael. Complex indications provided by unrefuted evidence of systematic testing. Murders who resisted the horrific opportunity to colonial authorities. These other tests can also be damaged by greed and manipulation. Immediately. The results were unprecedented in terms of size and severity. A few days after the destruction of Succession, the colonial court. Permanent convictions against Ezekiel and Judith Harrington with many people and 57-point murder allegations. Additional costs related to fraud, corruption, judicial corruption, and conspiracy. That's what the evidence was. Because it is so extensive with excellent crimes, forensic scientists later placed the incident in Harrington as a majority. Full criminal prosecution in the field of American colonial history. But legal. The outcome is far beyond the boundaries of considerable punishment for two dead offenders. Systematic. Harrington criticized it in combination with evidence of links with corrupt officials throughout colonial legal. The system caused a complete overview of the test procedures identified. An astonishing model of abuse and manipulation in the New England community. Father Binot Thorne. The investigation found not only Harrington's crime but also evidence. Such a program worked in other colonies, which is the abuse of supernatural accusations of economic benefits were much more common than previous authorities. I doubt it. This revelation contributed to an increase in skepticism regarding the witch test, and helped accelerate legal reforms that ultimately ended the era of supernatural persecution during the colonial era. America. Built of bloody money, the financial empire was systematically demolished for 3 years. Obligation to create special legal procedures with the complexity of promoting decades of fraudulent products. Acquisition. Property worth over £25,000 is decided as is. Receiving by criminal instruments and colonial courts faced the unprecedented challenge of restoring stolen assets. The family of the victims killed decades ago. The financial recovery process revealed the truth. Harrington's activities provide additional evidence of a systematic approach to crime. Detail. Files in the ruins of the field show that the brothers and sisters are kept in deep documents about them. Confiscated object cards, a list of United Civil Servants, and even prediction of future criminal companies they had planned to establish in other colonies. Gabriel and Raphael Harrington turns out much more despite the terrible circumstances of their birth and childhood. I'm continuing to do what someone expected. Under the meticulous supervision of a doctor. William Harvey, a royal doctor brought from London, especially for his research into their state. They are not just survived his tests, but began to thrive to challenge a modern understanding of human development and adaptation. Dr. Harvey's first study. Gemini showed that their severe physical condition was not as limited as its parents claimed. Most of their apparent helplessness has been artificially imposed by intentional and psychological negligence. Operations are intended to depend on and control them. Appropriate medical assistance, nutrition, and therapy. Gabriel and Raphael have shown significant improvements in their mobility and general health. More. It should be noted when their intellectual opportunities, which were obvious in early childhood, flourished. Ultimately, they received proper education and social interaction. A few months after their salvation, the twins were reading at levels above most of the great adults, demonstrates mathematical ability that has been impressed with the university. Scientists demonstrate an artistic talent to attract the attention of intellectuals to the colony. Dr. Harvey. The detailed documentation of their advances has become a fundamental text in a new field of medical psychology. It demonstrates that intellectual ability was not determined by appearance or condition. His report. It shows challenges to key hypotheses about disabilities and intelligence, and the ability to provide appropriate help and education. It unlocks extraordinary possibilities even in the most difficult situations. The twins' testimony continued to be important in the trial following their salvation. Their detailed memories. Parents' conversations and activities ensure confirmation of documentary evidence. Prosecutors are building things against the dozens of surviving virtues that have helped Harrington's crimes over the years. But more importantly, their obvious intelligence and moral clarity may have made them persuade the witnesses. Accounts cannot be rejected as fantasy or manufacturing. Gabriel's psychological evaluation. Raphael, owned by Dr. Harvey and his colleagues. Their early traumatic experiences are expected. Despite years of isolation, abuse and psychological manipulation, twins show amazing emotional stability and moral development. He proposed innate stability, which protected them from the worst results of their testing. This stability has been proven. This is important as Gabriel and Raphael adapted to life near the prison and began interacting with the wider colonial community. Their physical state became the subject of curiosity to them. And sometimes fearful, their intelligence and their dignity quickly gained respect for those who found time. Know them not only as medical abnormalities, but as individuals. Changing public perceptions related to twins has become a strong debate of inclusion and education. People with physical differences. Gabriel and Raphael's success. Overcoming their situation provides evidence that human potential cannot be assessed by appearance. This company was used when everyone got the opportunity. Contribute to your talent and ideas. Their adult life has proven to be as great as their childhood tests. It was traumatizing. Gabriel became a respected jurist of the Bible. As evidence, witness protection and judicial corruption have influenced colonial legal practices for decades. Despite myself physical limitations, he was in demand after consulting on complex criminal cases and helped establish the first official procedure to protect child seekers at trial. That was Gabriel's legal innovation. He is directly informed of his children's experiences and his understanding of people's vulnerabilities. It is being exploited by people in power. His work led to the development of a special vessel developed Protection for disabled people is associated with handicap to investigate cases with child witness participation. In ways to collect and preserve improved conflicts and adaptation from vulnerable populations of the population. Raphael ordered his experience to become a doctor specializing in caring for affected children, abnormalities and victims of abuse. His medical practice was revolutionary. Focus on the treatment of patients as complete human beings, not just a collection of symptoms. Therapeutics emphasize dignity, education, and social integration. More than isolation and shame. Dr. Raphael Harrington, he became known. The first school in colonial America, particularly for learning, was established throughout the medical community. Children with disabilities. His agency shows that physical restrictions should not be restricted. Intellectual outcomes and this support and proper education can enable people who suffer from a variety of situations. It makes a great contribution to society. School success challenged dominant attitudes towards disability and education. In all colonies, encourage the creation of similar institutions and contribute to the wider society. A change in the way communities dealt with the most vulnerable members. Raphael. Educational philosophy highlighted the possibilities within each individual. The responsibility of the company that provides the opportunity to provide this possibility. Implementation. The two twins are married and have started their own family. The children do not show traces of their grandparents. Moral corruption or parents. Genetic disorders obtained due to the constant union between Ezekiel and Judith. Heritability that allowed Gabriel and Raphael to violate the cycle of suffering determined their first year. The success of twins in the creation of a love family was particularly important, considering the experiences of trauma for children. Their ability to form and nurture healthy relationships. Children, rules. A lifestyle with appropriate support and intervention is provided. Harrington's case was deep. Results to understand family dynamics, child development, and long-term outcomes of abuse. Gabriel and Raphael's recovery and subsequent achievements provide compelling evidence that there was stability and healing. If the victim receives appropriate support, perhaps even in the most extreme situations. Father Torrance's investigation has long influenced religious and legal institutions. Colonial America. Priests' methodology to gather evidence and protect witnesses and construction issues. It was a model for future research on influential offenders and helped establish the protocol. Includes organizations responsible for applying the law for generations. Detailed document of the Torn father on Harrington's case. It has become a mandatory reading for scientists, showing how legality and religious authorities and systematic evils can turn out. It thrives when communities fail to maintain proper supervision of institutions and leaders. His work contributed to and strengthened reforms in both civil and religious management. Protection against abuse of power. The physical location of Harrington's succession was designated as a monument. Land with colonial authorities. The ruins remained intact as a reminder that justice could be damaged. Community enables fear and superstition to reduce critical thinking and morality. Courage. The monument is supported by means created after the sale of the confiscated Harrington property. As an educational site where visitors can discover the dangers and uncontrolled importance of authority. Protecting vulnerable members of the community. Simple stone marker. Not just today. Not only the date of the death of the brothers and sisters, but also the registration commissioned by Gabriel and Raphael. There is evidence of that. Evil is not supernatural. It's a human choice that can be made normally. People who appreciate the comfort of consciousness. Leave everyone who passes, don't forget that justice depends on courage. Those who refuse to remain silent face negligence. Probably many. In Harrington's case, it should be noted that the child shows the child no matter what their physical condition or social condition is. Status has full dignity and moral institutions that should be respected and protected. Maria Gabriel and Raphael. Explaining the crimes of parents despite being totally dependent on the same parent for survival. Modern hypotheses regarding childhood ineffectiveness and moral responsibility are being debated. Their story has become a strong argument in favor of child rights and protection that affects legal and social events around the world. American story. Aware that children can become both victims of abuse and agents of their own release. Contributed to childhood development concepts that emphasized personal protection, education, and respect. Dignity. The twin legacy went beyond their direct historical background to influence the broader debate. Rights to disability, protection of victims, and prevention of systematic violence. Their demonstration that physical limitation should not limit intellectual or moral development. It lasted for centuries and contributed to a more comprehensive notion of human and social possibilities. Responsibility. The Harrington incident continues to resonate with modern debates. Children's protection, right to invalidity and prevention of institutional violence. Gabriel and Raphael's story shows that people have incredible stability and the ability to understand morality. When providing tools and support, they are necessary to overcome disasters. Their physical condition or their traumatic experiences. Their final victory on the device. Impossible situations serve as lasting evidence of human dignity. It cannot be destroyed by abuse or negligence, and the society has both opportunities and obligations to support all people in implementation. Possibility of contributions and achievements. This enigma shows us how to do that. When fear and superstition are redesigned, communities can become co-addicts in evil. Critical thinking and moral courage. Harrington's brothers and sisters were almost successful. For 20 years, not because they were supernatural monsters, but because they understood how to exploit people. The weaknesses are to become one another's neighbors to make a profit. Their final defeat did not come from God. From the definition of courageous people who intervene, but refused. Save silence in the face of injustice. What do you think about this story? I think you could be someone else. Colonial American witch hunters controlled such figures to cover using supernatural fear. Systematic for profit? Comment below on the theory of the number of other gods' judgments. In fact, the crime was calculated. If you like this story and want a worse story, subscribe, knock. Share your bell notifications and puzzles with your loved ones on the dark side of American history. See you soon. In the following video we will consider another case of colonial evil. Most people will want to forget.